She wasn't prepared for it. And pay attention, because the tension pretending not to see is spilling into the open. For years, one name sat at the top of women's basketball. MVP trophies. Championship banners. Control of the narrative. WNBA superstar Aya Wilson. But what happens when dominance meets a challenger who doesn't ask for permission and doesn't wait her turn?
WNBA champion, A'ja Wilson.
Quietly, behind closed doors, opinions shifted and priorities changed. The spotlight Wilson believed was hers began drifting toward the one player she never took seriously. Caitlin Clark. Was it confidence that kept her calm, or denial that kept her blind? Because Clark didn't just arrive. She detonated expectations. Sold out arenas. Record-breaking ratings. A style of play that pulled casual fans into a sport they had never watched before. This isn't a story about box scores or buzzer beaters. It's about power, insecurity, and how resisting change can accelerate your own replacement.
Caitlin Clark has captured the basketball world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Because in elite sports, the real threat isn't the rival you confront head-on. It's the one who takes your place while you're still convincing yourself nothing has changed. The setup. 2 years of pressure quietly building beneath the surface. To understand how this moment came into existence, you have to rewind to a time when there was no debate, no rivalry, no question marks. In 2022, A'ja Wilson wasn't just dominant. She was unchallenged.
First time, Wilson is watching the moment she found out she won that third MVP trophy.
The face of the league. The symbol of everything the modern WNBA represented. MVP trophies stacked like proof of ownership. Championship banners hanging as reminders of who controlled the hierarchy. Corporate endorsements flowing in without negotiation. Media panels speaking her name as if it were synonymous with women's basketball itself. She wasn't chasing greatness anymore. She was defending territory every morning. Wilson woke up knowing the spotlight would find her no matter where she stood. Cameras followed her movements. Analysts framed every conversation around her legacy. Fans debated where she ranked among the greatest ever while she was still in her prime. She had earned that position through years of work, sacrifice, and dominance. And once someone reaches that level, sharing the spotlight doesn't feel like generosity. It feels like surrendered. That's why the idea of a college player disrupting this balance felt laughable at first.
A two-time Olympic gold medalist and two-time WNBA champion, A'ja Wilson.
Caitlin Clark was talented, sure. Interesting, maybe. But she existed outside the professional ecosystem. She hadn't paid her dues in the league. She hadn't felt the grind of a full WNBA season. She wasn't supposed to matter yet. The system had an order, and Wilson sat comfortably at the top of it. Then Clark didn't follow the script. She didn't arrive slowly. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't tiptoe into relevance. She burst through the door with range that bent defensive schemes and confidence that refused to shrink under attention. Her shots weren't just highlights. They were statements. Shots from distances defenders were trained to ignore. Pull-ups that defied logic. Performances that didn't just win games, but hijacked attention. Before long, something unusual started happening. Arenas were selling out weeks in advance, not for teams, but for one player. Television ratings surged every time her name appeared on the schedule. Clips of her shots traveled faster than official league promotions ever had. She wasn't just attracting basketball fans. She was pulling in people who had never watched a women's game before and turning them into repeat viewers. This wasn't organic growth. This was disruption. For the first time in years, Wilson wasn't the automatic center of every conversation. She was still dominant. Still elite. Still winning. But attention, the most valuable currency in modern sports, was starting to split. And for someone who had spent years being the undisputed focal point, that shift didn't feel like progress for the sport. It felt like something being taken. At first, the response was quiet. Easy to miss. A social media like here. A carefully timed post there. A quote emphasizing sustained excellence without mentioning names. Nothing direct enough to call out, but nothing accidental either. The message wasn't shouted. It was implied. Clark's moments were met with reminders of veteran greatness. Her milestones were followed by throwbacks. Her accolades were framed as premature. It was subtle enough that casual fans shrugged it off. But insiders noticed. The pattern was there for anyone willing to look, and the more Clark's influence grew, the harder it became to hide the discomfort. Interviews shifted in tone. Answers grew sharper. Praise became conditional. Instead of celebrating the growth of the sport, conversations kept circling back to who had earned their place. The language of unity slowly transformed into the language of protection. Wilson didn't see herself as threatened. She saw herself as defending order, but the problem with resisting change is that it doesn't stop momentum. It only reveals fear. By the time Clark's name dominated national headlines, the tension was no longer theoretical. It was visible. And while fans argued online and media narratives clashed, something far more important was happening quietly behind the scenes. People with decision-making power were watching. Not highlights. Not box scores. Behavior. Attitude. Reactions, because dominance on the court is only one part of what matters at the highest levels. Here's the part rarely discussed in public. The part that never trends on social media. The part that doesn't show up in highlight reels. Every dominant system has blind spots. And every star player thrives within rules that quietly favor their strengths. Wilson's game was devastating inside the WNBA environment. Physical presence. Aggression. Relentless pressure. A style that punished defenders and forced officials into decisions. On paper, it looked unstoppable, but international basketball doesn't reward dominance the same way. Inside the WNBA, officiating trends protect offensive players. Contact is scrutinized. Whistles come quickly. Stars receive benefit of the doubt. It's not corruption. It's structure. And Wilson mastered it. She understood how to initiate contact. How to exaggerate impact. How to freeze after collisions just long enough to draw attention. It wasn't weakness. It was adaptation. The problem is that adaptation doesn't travel. On the international stage, referees don't care about resumes. They don't care about league narratives. They don't care who sells jerseys. Physicality isn't punished. It's expected. Plays that result in free throws domestically are waved off globally. And when a player's rhythm depends on constant interruptions, that environment becomes hostile. Team USA evaluators knew this. They had seen it before. Stars who looked invincible at home struggling when whistles disappeared. Efficiency dropping. Frustration rising. Composure cracking. When Wilson played in international exhibitions, the pattern repeated. Fewer calls. More contact. Less control. Her scoring didn't just dip, it stalled. And more importantly, her response to that resistance raised concerns. Visible frustration. Extended conversations with officials. Body language that shifted when calls didn't come. Meanwhile, Clark's game didn't change. She wasn't relying on contact. She wasn't hunting whistles. Her offense existed beyond officiating. Deep-range shooting. Movement without the ball. Reads made before defenders reacted. When contact came, she adjusted midair. Finished anyway. Her points weren't granted. They were unavoidable. That distinction matters more than fans realize. International basketball values self-sufficiency. It rewards players who don't need the game to stop for them to succeed. And the contrast between these two styles became impossible to ignore when viewed side by side. Wilson's approach dominated one ecosystem. Clark's translated across all of them, and while fans debated MVPs and media argued legacy, Team USA staff focused on something simpler. Who could function when comfort disappeared? Who could adapt when systems didn't favor them? Who could maintain composure when whistles stayed silent? This wasn't personal. It was professional. At the same time, behavior off the court continued to accumulate. Every dismissive comment, every passive-aggressive reaction, every moment where individual frustration eclipsed collective growth. None of it caused immediate consequences. But all of it was recorded because when building a national team, talent is assumed. Character is evaluated, and by the time roster discussions became serious, the conclusion wasn't sudden. It was earned. When the preliminary pool for the 2026 World Cup was released, the reaction told the entire story. One name missing changed everything. For Wilson, the omission wasn't just professional. It was existential. Years of dominance had built an expectation of permanence. And permanence, once broken, feels like betrayal. Sources described anger, confusion, urgency. Phone calls fired off in rapid succession. Meetings requested. Explanations demanded. Not reflection. Not acceptance. Resistance. Clark's response couldn't have been more different. There was no celebration tour. No victory lap. Just gratitude. Acknowledgement of opportunity. Respect for veterans. A focus on learning and contributing. No shade. No commentary. No noise. That contrast sealed the decision more than any statistic ever could, because Team USA isn't built to showcase individuals. It's built to survive pressure. Hostile crowds. Unfavorable officiating. National expectation. One emotional fracture can destabilize everything. Coaches had watched Wilson's reactions for 2 years. Not her points. Her posture. How she handled not being centered. How she responded when attention shifted. How she framed other players' success. By the time the cut became official, it wasn't punishment. It was alignment. This wasn't about erasing a legacy. It was about recognizing evolution. Clark represented a different kind of influence. One that expanded the sport instead of guarding territory. One that created fans instead of competing for attention. Her appeal crossed borders. Her game spoke languages whistles never could. And her demeanor suggested something essential for international success: emotional stability. The chemistry forming between Clark and players like Aaliyah Boston wasn't accidental. It was built on mutual respect, not hierarchy. On shared growth, not control. Something that couldn't have existed in a system centered around entitlement, and that's the shift happening now. Not just in one roster. In the philosophy of women's basketball itself, the era of dominance enforced by systems is fading. The era of dominance sustained by adaptability is beginning. Team USA didn't just make a selection. They sent a signal. That character compounds. That humility scales. That influence earned lasts longer than influence protected. Power rarely collapses loudly. It fades quietly as new standards replace old ones. And when the moment finally arrives, there are no explanations. Only outcomes. This wasn't the end of a rivalry. It was the beginning of a recalibration. Power almost never falls apart on a stage. It fades quietly, piece by piece, in rooms without cameras and conversations without witnesses. Confidence can slowly turn into certainty, and certainty into entitlement. Leadership, when left unchecked, can become isolation. And when the moment of reckoning finally arrives, it doesn't announce itself. It simply happens. At the highest levels, legacies aren't undone by losing games. They're reshaped by how someone reacts when attention drifts elsewhere.
2026 is shaping up to be a big year in the sports world, with global stages, iconic venues, and can't-miss moments.
So here's the question that refuses to disappear. Was this just one roster decision, or the first sign of a deeper shift in how women's basketball defines value, influence, and authority? If respect now has to be earned again instead of assumed, who else is standing on unstable ground? Because this moment wasn't a conclusion. It was a warning that the next chapter has already begun.